What if I told you that Pluribus' fifth episode is genius, not just for the story, but for the hidden details that creator Vince Gilligan carefully put into every scene? For instance, the numerous recycling bins, dumpsters, and bags seen in this episode, and how it's foreshadowing how the hive recycles dead human bodies into a drinkable liquid they can consume, a fact we discover in episode 6 courtesy of John Cena. These touches are deliberately placed by the filmmakers, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. And once you notice them, you can't help but wonder, why? What are the filmmakers trying to say with these touches? There's many details present in Pluribus' fifth episode that further develop the motifs we've seen so far. Right away, we get a beautiful opening shot of these hospital curtains. If you zoom way in, you'll see that they're made out of repeating hexagonal structures. When I first saw this, I thought, it looks just like a honeycomb. We see similar hexagonal structures minutes later reflected in the hospital window as Carol falls asleep. I've talked in previous videos about how much bee imagery surrounds the hive in Pluribus, and it gets cranked up big time in this episode. One of my favorite examples of this is the amber liquid that the hive drinks religiously. It kind of reminds you of honey, doesn't it? I've also talked in previous videos about how much planes, helicopters, and aircraft show up again and again in Pluribus, and how they all make a sort of buzzing sound like bees, and also, fly like bees. In episode 5, there's a few scenes with drones that accentuate this bee motif even more. It's funny, a drone is actually the name for male bees whose sole purpose is to mate with a new queen bee from another colony. Carol, in Pluribus, is as good as the queen bee. The hive bends to her will and wants to make her happy. Speaking of buzzing sounds, modern drones sound the most like bees of any aircraft we've seen so far because of their small propellers. It's not hard to see the similarities between a flying buzzing drone and a flying buzzing bee. A few other cool details tying into this bee motif is the fact this drone is also hexagonal in shape, like the honeycomb we talked about moments ago. One last thing about aircraft and bees. The company in charge of making these multi-wallpaper bags is called Agrijet. Interesting. The writers could have written literally any other name for this fictional company, but they went with Agrijet, a combination of the words agriculture and jet. We already know this show seems to use aircraft as a metaphor for bees, so that explains the jet part of this, but what about the agri or agriculture part of the name? Well, bees are, in fact, essential biological agents of agriculture, providing critical pollination services for over 80% of flowering plants, including many human-cultivated crops. Is this coincidence or intentional? I'll let you decide. Another one of my favorite parts of the episode is the handcuff that Carol wears throughout most of the runtime. If you remember, Carol handcuffed herself to Zosia in the previous episode, a connection which the hive severed quickly after. And in episode 5, Carol just wears this handcuff for over half the episode. We see it when she goes to bed, washes her hands, and waits around in the hospital for news about Zosia. Episode 5 marks a dramatic shift in the storytelling of Pluribus. For the first time, Carol is left alone and isolated on purpose by the hive. I love this shot of her in her house, framed through her kitchen window. It feels like she's in jail here, truly by herself. Later, she finds the key to her handcuff inside her police car, and moments earlier, she realizes she could free these guns from the center compartment with the push of a button. It really seems like, so far, Carol's creating too many problems for herself. She sure seems like she's drowning in the middle of a lake, like Zosia talked about in episode 3. She's just thrashing around, too busy freaking out to realize that there are simpler solutions to her problems. Maybe Pluribus, with Carol's handcuff, is trying to highlight the truth of Zosia's statement about how much we're really drowning out here, how much we put ourselves in jails of our own making and create problems for ourselves because we just don't want to get help from anybody. I love how Vince Gilligan seems to be using these handcuffs to show just how much rigid individuality can put us in harsh cages. Manusos, spoiler alert, rejects any and all help from the hive in episode 7 as he treks towards Carol in New Mexico. Manusos represents, for me, individuality taken to its absolute extreme. He could have accepted help from the hive and gotten to Carol in just a few hours, but he decided to suffer and almost lose his life because he didn't trust them. I love how Vince and the filmmakers behind Pluribus balance showing the downsides to both individualism and collectivism, doing so with recurring props and imagery. Real quick, consider subscribing to my Substack. I publish the written versions of these essays there, along with movie reviews and thoughts on stuff I'm watching that doesn't make it into my YouTube videos. The name is Filmanalysis, and the link is in the description if you want to subscribe. In this episode, I also saw a lot more religious messaging, which I've discussed in previous videos. For one, there's a bunch of shots angled directly down onto Carol as she's driving, stuck in this dumpster, and roaming around Sprouts. It reminds me of when Zosia tells Carol in episode 2 that a Reaper drone is watching her in the sky. The Hive leaves this episode, but we know they're still keeping tabs on Carol and watching her via drones. It feels like the Hive is basically God, watching her from above, seeing everything she's doing. Then there's the fact that there's 13 survivors, including Carol.
I've made a video.
I want you to make 12 copies and distribute them to all of the other people like me.
Jesus had 12 disciples, and Carol is clearly leading the resistance against the Hive, so I guess she's Jesus in this show. Then there's one of my favorite lines of dialogue in the episode.
If you don't do it, I can't be held responsible for the biblically shitty mood in which I will no doubt find myself.
And spoiler alert, but we learn in later episodes that the Hive left Carol in Albuquerque for 40 days, kind of like how the flood lasted for 40 days and 40 nights in the Bible, or how Jesus was tempted by the devil for 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. 40 days and 40 nights is a huge recurring theme in the Bible at large, appearing in crucial moments of Moses and Elijah's story as well. Speaking of biblical themes, another thing I wanted to draw your attention to is the music of this episode. We've talked before about how important music is to Pluribus, with the main title sequence using singing voices and melodies as a metaphor for the connection of the hive mind. There's two key scenes where the music does a lot of heavy lifting. One is the scene where the hive evacuates the hospital. Speaking of biblical themes, Apple TV's official YouTube channel calls this scene the Exodus. But we get this beautiful harmonic singing that sounds a little bit like Gregorian chants performed by Christian monks. It shows the peace and tranquility of the hive, yes, but it also ties into this religious theming that's becoming a bigger and bigger part of the show. On a slightly different note, no pun intended, the other scene with striking music is the one with Carol when she puts stone tablets over Helen's grave. It marks a shift in her mood and outlook. This music feels really easy to listen to and laid back, and this shot of Carol against the setting sun really reflects this calmer vibe from Carol for a few minutes. Remember, this happens right after she finds the key to her handcuff and unlocks the guns from the center console. Carol has her own music too. In future episodes, we're going to watch her drive around singing various songs by herself. Songs revolve around repeating musical ideas and lyrics, and while many people thought watching Carol listen to the same message on the Hive's answering machine over and over again was boring, I think it was done for a bigger purpose to reinforce these themes of repetition. Spoiler alert, but remember how, in Manusso's famous road trip, he says the same thing over and over again as he practices his English? He says, "My name is Manussos Oviedo. I am not one of them. I wish to save the world." He says this countless times in that episode, and in Pluribus as a whole, this theme of repetition comes up time and time again. Remember how the alien signal itself repeats every 78 seconds? I covered this a lot in my first Pluribus video, so if you want to understand what I think it means, watch that one. Another fun motif that's actually just a bit of foreshadowing is the amount of times we see recycling bins, dumpsters, and bags in this episode. Like this moment when Carol tries to stuff this cloche into a blue recycling bin, or how she falls into this recycling dumpster, or how at Sprouts there's a few bags featured prominently urging shoppers to recycle. I don't think there's any clever metaphor behind this other than the fact that, spoiler alert, the hive is basically recycling dead human bodies into a drinkable liquid they can consume. They're recycling their own species, basically, and the milk cartons that Carol finds in this huge recycling dumpster is a nod to that idea. That's my thoughts on it. What do you think? We've discussed in past videos this color theming of blue and yellow in Pluribus, reflected in its design, posters, and marketing materials. Episode 5 starts, like Episode 3, with the color blue dominating the frame. In Episode 3 it was ice, but in this episode it's a blue curtain at the hospital. Like past episodes, we get more shots of beautiful blue skies in this one, including one of my favorite shots of the series when Carol opens up this recycling dumpster, which is also yellow and blue. I still see Carol representing yellow and the hive representing blue. This shot of Carol against the setting orange and yellow sun is a perfect representation of her at this point in the episode and story. Setting suns typically signal a more laid-back vibe in popular shows and movies, and showing a more laid-back version of the sun, which represents Carol, to show her inner state at this moment was brilliant, I think. Speaking of blue and yellow, look at this dog food that Carol pulls from the aisle at Sprouts. It's hilariously called Western Wolf with a photo of a pug on it, which I think connects to the wolves we see in this episode, by the way. Also, I feel like the people who designed this fictional dog food brand just put a photo of their pug on it for kicks. But, getting back to the analysis, this bag is yellow and blue as well, right? Let's talk about blue for a second. One of my favorite examples of this blue color scheme in the episode is Carol's flashlight. We see it when she gets on the roof of this hotel and sees the hive evacuating Albuquerque, but we also see it in key scenes where she's investigating the hive's cannibalism infrastructure. We've talked about ice as a big motif in the show, and how the hive represents a certain detached coldness, despite the fact they're always smiling all the time. It's ironic then that in episode 5, Carol discovers an industrial freezer where the hive stores human remains below freezing. And it's ironic how Carol, with her icy personality, is represented by the color yellow in the show. How I interpret this is, Carol is a human being who has experienced deep joy in her life, and that joy represents the color yellow. Like how in episode 3 she explains to Zosia the joy of drinking coffee on a canal in Amsterdam, or walking through the woods.
Like you're taking a hike in the woods and there's a warm rain and the trees are so tall you can't even see the tops.
The hive, although they seem happy and smiley, don't really experience anything. They don't stop to take in the view, they don't write poetry, they're just there. Even Zosia, after taking grenade shrapnel in the back, smiles as she tells Carol medics are on their way. It doesn't seem like they could possibly have a truly warm, meaningful experience. There's a certain warmth that comes from individual experience. It comes from deep inside us as we watch a beautiful sunset, or take in a beautiful vista, or connect with someone close to us. That's something I don't think the hive really experiences at all. That's just my latest interpretation of these colors. What did you notice in Pluribus' 5th episode? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, consider subscribing to my channel. I plan to do a video on every episode of Pluribus up until the season finale. I'll see you next time.